Hi, everyone. Welcome to Metaphysical. Have you seen Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull? Well, did you know that it's based on a real crystal skull said to possess mysterious powers? And amazingly, it's not the only one that's been found. These little understood relics seem to be from civilizations past or maybe other worlds. Want to hear the strange history we dug up? Then join remote viewer John Vivanco and me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, for a show that's out of this world. John,
Rob,
brother, how you doing?
good. How are you?
Good. I always get so excited for this show. It's like
It's
I have so
fun.
much fun. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if you guys are at home listening to this, the Metaphysical podcast, if you could remember to leave us a review, because the review is actually going to help us reach more people. More people are going to see this podcast, and we're going to get this information into mainstream society, which is sorely needed right now with everything going on.
Really, you think we'll get this into mainstream society? You're so positive.
It kind of already is, really. I mean, today's episode is about the Crystal Skull. We have even Dan Aykroyd going on the Joe Rogan show talking about this stuff, you know.
And who hasn't watched Indiana Jones? So
yeah, or Dan Aykroyd.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, Indiana Jones. That last Crystal Skull movie really blew. It sucked. It was terrible. It ruined.
I don't even remember watching it.
Yeah, it was awful. Yeah. And they basically brought in like all of this like nonsense elongated skull Anunnaki stuff, alien stuff into the entire thing, which kind of have nothing to do with the real Crystal Skull story, aside from the fact that perhaps the Crystal Skulls were created by aliens. We don't know.
I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah. Yes. There's nothing to say yet because we haven't gotten to that part of the show.
But yeah, look at the skull there. It's definitely aliens. Got the big eyes.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. I like that movie was so uneventful to me that I forgot that I even watched it.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on with these crystal skulls that I think, you know, people have been talking about in different circles, right? Like the supposed effects from being around these crystal skulls. So like one is people have experienced healings, expanded psychic abilities, information transfer where the skulls actually deliver information to the person that it's around. I guess using supernormal or other dimensional means. I have no idea. And then activates certain parts of the brain. And I guess activates your third eye because it is reported to cause visions in people that are around the real ones, not the, you know, the hundreds that are probably made in
thousands upon thousands, if not millions. I mean, you can go to a crystal shop and buy any type of little crystal skull.
Right.
And I've seen that there are forums online where people are talking about the effects of those even and how they've had amazing effects. Of course, you know, anthropomorphizing. Think about a skull too. Skull is always that. It's that idea of something that is mysterious because we all die and it results in a skull being left. And so there's this mystery about it. So there's going to be a lot of just psychological energy tied up in the visual of a skull. It's scary to us, but it's also got this mystery behind it. And it's also potentially an object of power, right? If I have I drink my coffee from a skull. Didn't you know that? You know, I receive the power from it. I'm just kidding. I don't. But I mean, you know, it's that.
Do you really do that, John?
I do, Rob. Well, you know, I mean, it's that thing. It's like it draws out this feeling of what's beyond in people. And so there is going to be a lot of at least psychological energy around it. It's inevitable.
There's a lot of speculation around these skulls being sort of like cosmic hard drives. Okay. And I actually have a clip from Ancient Aliens that I want to show in a moment. But before that, I'm going to read this quote from a guy named Joshua Shapiro, who was the co-author of this book called The Mysteries of the Crystal Skulls Revealed, who kind of reported a bunch of these things that we just went over, right? Like the healing and all of that stuff. And the quote here is, "We believe the crystal skulls are a form of computer which are able to record energy and vibration that occur around them. The skull will thoroughly replay all events or images of the people who have come into contact with them, i.e., they contain the history of our world." So that's interesting. I mean, the idea that crystals carry energy is not wrong, I don't think. I mean, the entire Atlantean technology was supposed to have revolved around some form of biotechnology crossed with like crystalline power, a crystal power somehow. And I mean, what's weird is even crystals, they have to use crystals to make certain electronics function properly. We're talking about like watches. Hey, the iPhone has a crystal in it, right?
So, oh yeah, I mean every microcircuit that we have these days, from our refrigerators to the computers, doesn't matter. It's got crystals in it because crystals are a transistor and they can regulate electricity. So
don't you think that's interesting?
Right? It is interesting. And I mean, crystals will produce a piezoelectric charge. They will produce energy when there's pressure put on them.
And define a piezoelectric charge for everybody at home?
It's a static electricity. Basically, it will produce a static electricity, potentially even light up when you hit it, if you hit it very hard. So it has that capability, and that's used in all electronics, because you think about these microcircuits and the amount of regulation of electricity that goes into that. It's got to be regulated. And crystal can take energy, take electricity, and literally calm it down or speed it up to a specific hertz based on how big that little piece of crystal is and what shape it is.
Right.
So then you had computer companies who really researched this and even researched the skull, the crystal skull. HP did, in fact.
Yeah.
So it's like these are okay. Think about where we came from. We came from the Iron Age, where tools and whatnot were produced around iron. Now
I think we're in the soy age now.
We're in the soy age.
Yeah, the Iron Age was
crystal
great,
age.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, we were in the. Oh,
what'd you say?
We're in the crystal age now.
Yes,
because we use crystals for the furtherment of our technology in general. And I think it's just in the infancy as far as human understanding goes, as far as what crystals can do. There's a lot. I mean, a crystal is full of microstructures, shapes, and every different type of crystal has different shaped microstructures than the next crystal. So, for instance, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but quartz. So quartz crystal, for instance, if all of the microstructures are in a pyramid shape, well, we know about pyramids, right? Pyramid, just that shape will produce an energy. So what are you going to get? What's going to happen, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of microstructures in the form of a pyramid inside these things.
I had this weird desire to meditate in a crystal pyramid when you were talking. It's like, what would happen?
What would happen?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, it's like, the ether, not like, the kidnapping ether or the ether bunny or any, like that. It's more like the ether,
real ether. Yeah.
The fifth, the element, sorry, ether bunny. The fifth element, that was always thought to be something that was the carrier of light waves and gravity. Ether, the ether.
Yeah.
But that was discounted in the late 1800s by the Mitchell-Morley experiment. But what's been shown throughout, that time between then and now is that scientists have come out and said that experiment's flawed. And there does exist a carrier, some kind of carrier of light waves and gravity. And so none of that made it into the calculations of physics or anything like that, an ether. Even though scientists say that physics experiment was flawed, and there does have to exist something. So I think that crystals operate on the side, as well as pyramids and other shapes. If you read Shape Power by Dan Davidson, talks a lot about the power of shapes. I think that they operate off of some function of converting, increasing, changing the ether and moving energy. I really do. And I think that
Crazy.
if we had this better understanding of the ether instead of discounting it, the fifth element, I think we get somewhere with this, at least on the side of science.
Dude, you want to hear something crazy? You're just blowing my mind right now. Okay, in the East, right? When the legends and the myths talk about this, that when a person is cultivated up to a certain point, their entire body basically turns almost crystalline, transparent. Their body becomes like a diamond. They actually talk about this in poems
Yep.
and all kinds of stuff. Now, if a crystal, on the diamond being like the king of all crystals, really, I mean, thinking about what it does and how how hard it is, the entire thing, right? And they talk about forming a body that's harder than diamond, right? If that's true about the ether and these higher level beings, whatever you want to call them, like Jesus or whoever, cultivate themselves to have a body that's like that. Think about it. The crystal or the diamond mixed with the ether is what forms creation. And like that's how if you really look into like how do we have stars and stuff out there? There had to have been some force that took advantage of this terrible ether and created something beautiful out of it, you know?
This terrible that's a book title. This Terrible Ether by Rob Counts.
Well, it's sort of like the negative charge, right? The chaos, this like thing that like has a terrible sort of energy that actually because of it, it almost you can use it to turn it into something that is the creation of everything. And like look around us, right?
Right. Okay, so check this out. So referring back to what these ancient people, the Buddhist monks and whatnot, have spoken about with the body turning into like a crystalline type
Yes.
light form. So to that specifically, we have literally seen data. Remote viewers have described it. I've viewed it as well, where monks in meditation, when they I don't even know what the word to use for it is, when they leave this place and if you can call it ascending, when they ascend, they literally do that. Like we've seen it with data. They literally turn into a crystalline body light form. So, I mean, your intuition is dead on with that from what
That's
we see.
crazy.
Right. There's a
Wow.
transformation of the body into a crystalline structure.
So the crystal skull really makes sense then in terms of why use crystals, like and all of that, right? But there's kind of a larger story to this whole thing, and I want to get your reaction to this video. It was actually on Ancient Aliens. They explained it really well, very succinctly, on what the theory is behind these crystal skulls. These like 12 or 13 crystal skulls that they seem to have found, or that they believe existed or were created. So, Lindsay, if you could pull that up for us and we can check this clip out, it's going to give us a lot of information and I want to hear your reaction to this, John.
According to legend, the secret of the skulls will be revealed when the original 13 skulls come together to form a global grid. In fact, there are many who believe that this so-called reunion of the skulls will awaken sacred knowledge of the gods, knowledge that has been hidden from mankind for thousands of years.
According to some Native American myths, there are 12 inhabited planets out there, and each one of those skulls contains the information from one of these planets, including Earth. And the reason why there's a 13th skull is because the 13th skull contains the knowledge of all those planets. It's basically a backup.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's a really interesting thing, because there are so many artifacts that we have on this planet that are unrecognized, that are from previous cultures where there was alien involvement. I mean, in fact, it's like this is that's kind of a normal thing in reality throughout other systems that we've seen, is that there's interaction between different civilizations, and knowledge is passed, knowledge is given. Now, the question I have is that, what if these crystal skulls weren't necessarily for humans in bringing that knowledge together, but potentially for a civilization just in our past, like Atlantean civilization or something, right? I mean, what if that's misconstrued and the information that they have is really for a past civilization that's no longer here, and they're irrelevant to this time frame? I mean, I don't know. It's a question. It's a question I have.
But I think that's it. I think that we don't have the technology to plug into these things if they're in fact real.
That's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. We don't understand it. We don't get it. I mean, I know that crystals are something. Like I used to think that crystals were a new age construct. Like, well, that little rock is going to do this to you, and that rock's going to do that to you, and it's sort of this, I don't know, sort of belief,
pseudoscience,
right? This belief that you have that it's going to do something, and so it's a placebo,
right?
And I used to think that until I was standing there one day, and a person that I was with had a crystal, and they loved crystals, and I wasn't into it. I think I love them. I mean, you know, it's like when you're a kid, you just collect every single rock in the world. I love rocks. I love gems. They're so cool looking, but I didn't think that they did anything. So I'm standing there and I'm zoning out, and I just look over at it, and I literally feel palpably a jolt of energy come from it and shoot into my body, like I was being hit with something. And it started to make me feel really weird inside, really, really weird. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, something's happening. So I pick it up, and the feeling increased throughout my whole body, and I couldn't understand what was happening. So I set it down, and I was just staring at it for a while, because I was tripping out trying to understand what was going on here. So then this person had other crystals. So I put that one aside, and I grabbed another one, and it was the same thing, but a different type of energy hitting me. So what I did at that point was I took all of their crystals, and I felt every single one, and I wrote down what was happening inside of my body with it, going through my own little scientific process. And they all were doing different things inside of me. And I felt that they were doing different things to my physical body and my energetic body and emotional body. And I wrote it all down. And then this person had a book called The Book of Stones. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's any information in here that would correlate what I'm feeling. I looked through the book, and every single stone that I picked up and wrote down the information about was exactly what these other people were saying. Exactly.
Whoa.
So I now have a totally different viewpoint of crystals and what they can do and how powerful they can be, coming from just like not believing it at all and having this really impactful experience. And the thing that I found too is that certain frequencies from crystals don't mix that well, like within the body. And it could be different for every single person. So you have to be careful with what you mix, like holding a couple of different kinds together or one after the other, because what would happen to me is that I would get this like stone sickness if I held too many stones at once, or they were divergent to my energy, and I would be sick for days, literally every single time. So I have to be careful around them, and I judge very carefully what stones I touch or have around me or not, because of the impact. They're very powerful. When you get to, native cultures, they have sort of an animistic viewpoint of the world where everything has a consciousness. And with remote viewing, we've seen the same thing. Everything has a consciousness to it. Everything you can interact with, and everything has an energy to it, almost life to it. So I know it's absolutely, anti-scientific, but
well, so is astrology, though. And
So's a problem.
we know billionaires are using that, and they're
Right.
collecting crystals.
Right, exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
then they're like, you conspiracy theorists are a bunch of hippies, and meanwhile, like they're like art museums are filled with this stuff. You know,
right. So I'm telling you, there is a big power behind crystals, and you're talking about now you have a skull that is a very pristine crystalline structure that is literally cut against the axis of the crystal. It's like cutting against the grain. That was one of the things that was found out, right? That thing was cut against the grain of it, which is not something you normally do because it will shatter the whole crystal. So how would you cut it against the grain? When people cut crystals, they have to go with the grain.
Yeah.
Right? If they don't, it shatters. Now this thing's cut against the grain, and this thing is a massive, like pure crystal with tons of energy. Now add this other aspect to it, skull, and whatever that relates to, you're going to have a lot of power there. It's just an inevitability. And when people have the little crystal skulls that they even buy in shops, of course they're going to feel something from it. They are going to feel something just on the basic energetic side of it because they all have an energy to them.
Yeah. And regardless of these crystal skulls that were created that are, you know, speculatively from previous civilizations or whatever, not really recommended to have a skull hanging around as a crystal. I mean, just in terms of the symbol of the skull and what the skull means, and the fact that, you know, that's what's left after a human dies. So it does carry some signature of death along with it. You know, I don't understand the other crystal skulls. I'm not going to pretend like I do, but at least, you know, generally speaking. But I think, you know, what the Hewlett-Packard engineers who looked at the skull, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, they said that the only way the skull could have been designed the way that it is if it was polished over hundreds of years, because any other way would have cracked or broken the skull.
Right.
And that concept, that idea that something could have been polished down, a crystal could have been polished down to make that shape over a very long period of time, that's also very strange. This is Ben actually interviewing, what's his name? Bill Holman, the guy that has this skull, one of these skulls. This is the Mitchell Hedges skull, in fact.
Right. You know, that's an interesting thing about that skull is because HP, Hewlett-Packard, who did a study on it in the 1970s, I mean, they're a computer company. They're coming from the standpoint of microprocessors, right? They're coming from the standpoint of trying to understand crystalline structures in computing and technology. And I think it was really interesting that they investigated this skull.
It is.
Their results, what they found was contradictory to the Smithsonian. So here you have HP who says, well, we didn't see any cut marks with our microscopes on this stone, where Smithsonian says they saw cut marks on it. But then also they say that, well, it would have had to have been polished over it took 300 years to make this thing. But the thing is, the reason why they come to that conclusion is because they don't believe that there was anything before. And we just go back, well, the hunter-gatherers, I mean, they couldn't do this. So they would have to do it over this time period.
Right.
I don't know.
But of course, it's like you said, like the engineers are saying it had to have been polished because it's the only way they could have seen that type of thing to be done. But they have no idea of what a technology was like in a previous civilization, if there was one.
Right. So that doesn't even enter into the discussion. It's how did modern humans create it?
And let me ask you a more direct question, John. Who do you trust more, the Hewlett-Packard engineers or the Smithsonian?
Exactly. I mean, really, because Hewlett-Packard, they're just trying to figure out scientifically like how they can use these types of things more effectively. So they want to investigate it, while the Smithsonian is more interested in a narrative. You know, and the other thing too is that these skulls don't have any, like, they don't artistically look like the ones that came out of Aztec or Maya times. Stylistically, they're different. They don't look the same, right?
Yeah.
So they don't. So that's one of those things that they say, you know, they can't be from there because and they have to be fake because stylistically they don't look just like it.
Yeah, but that's okay. This is what upsets me about modern archaeology. Like everyone's like, well, the archaeologists say this, and it's like the first guy that found this came up with some story that he thought might be, was the first one to say it, and now that's the story of that thing, and we can't break that theory. I don't think that that's the way the world works, my friends. Like, okay, for instance, let's say the skull does predate culture, and some of the Aztecs got a hold of it, and they were like, "This thing holds power, and now we're going to use it to conduct our crazy, insane rituals, or and strengthen our power, or whatever it is." And the skull is found, you know, around the Mayans or in like the Aztec culture, or whatever it is, and now it doesn't relate to anything, so it has to be fake.
Right. But yeah, I mean it's like that's how archaeology works.
Right. And you know, there's no way to understand how, like, to carbon date a crystal is the problem.
You can't.
You can't.
It's impossible. Yeah. So the other thing too is that the what is it? The crystal came from, they say it came from Madagascar or Brazil. That's what the Smithsonian says. So it wasn't local to Mexico. So that was also an impossibility, right? Because it has to be new and fake, because the Mexicans wouldn't have access to crystal from Brazil or, you know, Madagascar, which is a ridiculous notion. They're just holding within the time frame of when they think humans develop. That's
exactly.
There's nothing else to it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing too that they really focus on to debunk it is the Mitchell-Hedges story, because his story is inconsistent. I mean, he had even said that he's not going to say where it came from, where he got it. I think there was one piece of information I came across, even though his daughter says that it came from a specific area. He said he wasn't going to say ultimately where it came from. So he was keeping something hidden about it, but it had changed hands earlier with other people.
And
Smithsonian found out.
Sotheby's got a hold of it.
Right. So now they debunk that, right? So now it's like that's used as this debunking tool against the age of it, at least, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of these were created. There were a lot created in the 1800s because it was a business to create stuff. It still is, actually. You can go to Peru, and there's this sort of underground market where you can buy creatures, alien mummy creatures, because people will create them in order to sell to tourists or the underground black market, thinking that they're going to get something out of it, thinking that, you know, people are going to think this is a real thing. So that's something that does happen.
I'm in. I want some.
I know, right?
Yeah. In the background somewhere in Peru, it's like a farmland, but they've got a 3D printer in their farm, and they're just printing out like little alien skeletons. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So this woman, Anna, who was, you know, Mitchell-Hedges' daughter. What a like weird story. The whole story of this guy, Mitchell-Hedges, it doesn't make any sense, honestly, because it seems to be that he was potentially a spy. You know, he gets involved with revolutionaries in Mexico under the bandit Pancho Villa. You know, they basically, he gets caught. They let him live in exchange for fighting with them. He gets injured, but somehow this guy Pancho Villa gives him the skull. This is one of the theories of how he got the skull. He gives him the skull as a token of appreciation for fighting in the.
Here is your reward for fighting with me.
I'm going to give you a 20,000-year-old skull. That you know. Yeah, sure.
So awesome.
The other story is that Anna. So they're near a pyramid in you know, wherever. I don't even know where it was. They're around a pyramid. They're excavating. They're on the top of the pyramid. They look down and they see through this hole a glimmer of light. Somehow the light is getting in there and it's shining down. So they drop Anna down with a rope. Anna, you know, they put some towels in the rope so that, you know, it's comfortable. And there's all kinds of like snakes and scorpions in there, just like Indiana Jones. And she somehow grabs the crystal skull and comes up with it without getting bit by a king cobra.
It's because she was little. She was little. They put her down there because she was little.
She was 17. and she was probably a lot lighter than the other fatties that were with them excavating there.
Yeah.
And so, so anyway, this is her story, but then her story changes over the course of her life. You know, the older she gets, the weirder the story, like the more different the stories get about what actually happened. Dan Aykroyd on the Joe Rogan show talked of her looking, like, basically putting another Indiana Jones scene where he like puts his hand into that thing and pulls the lever or whatever, and so she finds the skull in there and pulls it out, apparently. Right. And that's how they found it. You know, and then the story of Sotheby's getting it. So apparently he loans the skull to Sotheby's. Why you'd do that, I have no idea. I guess they wanted to look at it, and then he sees in the newspaper that it's up for auction or something like that, and he gets furious. He goes down there and he has to actually buy it back from Sotheby's.
Really? Seriously?
Yeah. And check this out. This guy's story is like Mitchell-Hedges. Like, his story is so unbelievable. Like, at one point, what is he moved to New York City? He moves to New York City, and he's rooming with some guy named Bronstein, right? So 2 years later, the British Secret Service informed Mitchell-Hedges that Bronstein was actually Leon Trotsky, the leader of the Russian Revolution. Like, what are the chances of finding a crystal skull?
His roommate was Trotsky?
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's so much weird stuff. Like, was this guy a spy? Because how are you getting involved with Pancho frickin' Villa, and then going from there and having an apartment in New York City where you somehow get to room with a guy named Bronstein? You find a crystal skull, you have a crystal skull, and none of the stories make any sense. Something about this seems like, you know, there could be some 3-letter agencies involved, because, like, you don't have a story like that in real life. Like, what are the mathematical probability of you rooming with Leon Trotsky?
That's just bizarre. That's really, really, really bizarre. That's a strange story. I've never heard that. I don't understand. It's like not heating. It's like the metal plate in my head is heating up. It's like that kind of a thing.
Do you really have a metal plate in your head? That explains a lot if you do.
I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Okay, but check this out. So the story doesn't really end there, because Mitchell-Hedges, when he got the skull, it wasn't really like, oh, this is a great skull. I get such great energy from this thing. No. Right. He called it the Skull of Doom.
Right.
And the speculation around that original crystal skull, the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull, is that it was used by high priests of the Maya when performing esoteric rites. And it basically is said that he willed death with the skull. If he willed death with the skull, death invariably followed. And it's been described as the embodiment of evil. Yeah.
But aren't they calling it the Skull of Love now?
Well, they are. This is what's so strange about this. Is like, how do we go from it being the Skull of Doom to now? Okay, is it sort of like the Spear of Destiny, where, you know, Hitler's trying to find the Spear of Destiny just because the Spear of Destiny has this neutral power of whoever owns the spear is victorious in war? Right. I don't know, but it's a strange story.
Well, the story, it's morphing. It's bizarre. I don't quite understand. I don't understand it. I mean, I'm still stuck on the Trotsky thing. Like, that's what I'm stuck on.
I'm pretty stuck on the Trotsky thing too.
You know, I had it was like my great uncle who used to be he was a treasure hunter, and he went through the United States into Mexico, Central America, and would do treasure hunt, would go probably looting like these locations. And he ended up with a missing eye, and so he had to wear an eye patch.
Why is this episode becoming a Goonies movie?
I know, right?
Like,
exactly.
We're like the little kids grown up from the Goonies talking about this stuff, and your uncle was One-Eyed Willie, who happens to also be, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, his life was a mystery. So he shows up in Ecuador at a certain point. He gets married, and his son eventually becomes the president of Ecuador. Like, what? I mean, that's like the Trotsky thing to me. It's like, wait, what? It's so weird. So weird. I
Yeah,
mean,
this
a
stuff
lot of
can
these,
happen, right? Like, it's not like it can't happen. It's
right.
just also important to call out the flags here,
Well, that's the weird thing, is that the Trotsky thing reminded me of the story of my uncle, and then how that's connected into this, like, wait, how did his son become the president of Ecuador? Like that thing, that whole thing is like, this guy's looting. I mean, looting of ancient relics ties into people who become presidents, families that become powerful, and intelligence agencies involved in trying to get these items, which takes me back to the Nazis.
Oh, yeah. Or
I mean,
just the CIA in general. I mean,
right,
how did,
exactly.
I mean, gosh, to this day, how did all of that gold disappear off of that train during World War II? When you have, General Patton going straight after the Nazis to intercept, and somehow the gold gets lost? Like, come on.
Yeah, no one didn't get lost. Yeah, it's weird, right? I mean, so you've got gold, then you've got relics of power. You've got relics of power, and to me, the whole crystal skull thing, that original story really smells of intelligence operations.
Yeah.
When you get to the story, so what's going on with it? Like, why is this one of those things where oligarchs and whatnot are looking for these items to put in their personal collections because of the power of the skull? If I could have that skull and will death on my enemies, I need that skull.
Well, but I mean, the spectacular story of combining all 13 skulls at some point in history to reveal the knowledge of the gods would be something that the occult powers would be very interested in. Also,
Right.
I want to point out that whatever skull the Smithsonian has, this is not the Mitchell-Hedges skull. That one is owned by whatever that guy's name is, Bill Holman. Thank you. In California, I guess. But
Right.
The skull of the Smithsonian just showed up on their doorstep in like 92. And it, like, they basically didn't understand it. They did some tests on it, and then the woman from the Smithsonian was like, "It's a fake." And then they still display it, as you said, right? So, I mean, yes, it's like some of these are definitely hoaxes. Like, there's no doubt, right?
I mean, they did tons of tests on the ones that they had in their museum, in their museums, right? So they did tons of tests on them to find out if they were fake. But I don't understand what fake means by their criteria, because they're already using an idea, a fake construct, in order to determine what's fake. Because they're not taking, who cares if it has machine marks on it? Machine marks literally does not mean that it's a fake and it came from the 1800s or whatever. Or
exactly.
It doesn't mean that, because cut marks are found on the Giza pyramids.
Yes.
Right? And it's all ignored. So,
well, and how about those tracks in the, was it Central America or whatever? The tracks that like look like they're from gigantic machinery of the past. I can't remember what they're called.
Oh, are you talking about the ones on the ocean floor?
The what?
The ones on the ocean floor.
They're in ocean, but then they come up onto some of these islands where some of these periods, I can't remember the name of those tracks, but it's like, I look at those and I'm like, you guys got to be kidding me. Like, these are machinery from the past,
Those are from the big, those big Jawa cars. The Jawas?
Yeah, it looks like actually probably, right?
Yeah.
The easiest like moving warehouses to like knock over in the history of design, right there.
Right. I mean, I've looked at those tracks and I'm going, I don't understand. I don't get it. I got to review that one.
The Jawas, hilarious. Oh man, yeah. So yeah, it's strange. I mean, there are a few of these. They are reported to be, if you bring them together, this ancient knowledge is revealed. We know that the Smithsonian, there's the Jawa warehouse. That's what I call it. They're literally just scrappers. They just throw everything in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there has to be some way. Okay, so we know like there's just not a thing that we can actually believe from the Smithsonian just because we know, like, even if you believe everything the Smithsonian says, the accusations revolved around them hiding stuff. What we know about them hiding giant bones from the early 1900s, they're not a source. They're not an actual academic source of like fact checking, whatever you want to call it. Like, you can't trust what they're saying. So there has to be some method that they have and know about to authenticate the actual true skulls. There has to be a way. Maybe they're using remote viewers like you to find these, track them down, to bring them into one place. Because if they are valuable, if they do contain information, then there's got to be people looking for these things. Where did this initial story even come from? I don't even know.
Which story?
The story of like there were 13 Atlantean crystal skulls, and like
that's what I'm trying to find out. I don't understand, because there are, okay, so you find this a lot where it's like it came from Native American mythology or Mayan mythology, but I haven't been able to find an actual source on that other than channeled information.
Or Mitchell-Hedges, who's basically saying that.
Or he was saying that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about the 13 skulls. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what that means. Channeled information, it's like in Aramamuru, channeled information was used to call that thing a portal. Ultimately, Aramamuru is like a portal to another world in Peru. And channeled information was written in 1960s about a location that a priest went through to escape from the Spanish with like a piece of alien technology, right?
Yeah.
But the native culture have taken on that myth, that idea, but that idea arose in a book in the 1960s by a guy who was channeling. It didn't come from anywhere before that.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like maybe the 13 skulls, I haven't found like where it truly comes from, but maybe the idea of the 13 skulls is a channeled information type situation.
Wow. That is an amazing image of that like reported Stargate doorway.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list. I've got to get there.
Let's do it, man. Expedition. I'm in.
Expedition, bro.
Okay, so you guys, this is the end of episode 1. In episode 2, we're actually going to be getting into the nature of crystals in general. Really strange phenomena revolved around these crystal skulls. Pop culture revolved around the crystal skulls. And most importantly, we're going to be getting into some of John's remote viewing data on the crystal skulls. So stick around.